You know, the Galactic Council really thought they had this whole Earth thing figured out, sitting in their crystal towers on Centauri Prime, sipping whatever passes for space coffee. They looked at their star charts and said, "Oh look, another primitive planet. It's time for the Earth Compliance Initiative." Because that's what they called it. The Earth Compliance Initiative. Like we were some kind of software that needed updating. These alien bureaucrats had conquered 14 solar systems without breaking a sweat. Their secret? Psychological warfare. Why waste resources on actual fighting when you can just send in your scariest guy to make everyone wet themselves and surrender immediately? Enter Zar'thok the Destroyer. And yes, that's actually his name. Apparently, when you're born on the war moon of Krexneth, subtlety isn't exactly a priority. This guy was 9 feet of pure nightmare fuel. 4 arms, each one capable of crushing steel. Skin that looked like it was carved from volcanic rock. Eyes that glowed red in the dark. And a voice that could make entire populations surrender just by clearing his throat. His resume was impressive. I'll give him that. The peaceful monks of Altair 7 took one look at him and immediately converted to a religion of absolute surrender. The warrior clans of Beta Centauri, famous for their death before dishonor. Motto, rewrote it to maybe dishonor isn't so bad after all after a 5-minute conversation with Zar'thok. The Galactic Council was feeling pretty confident. Humans were just another species of barely evolved primates who would crumble the moment they saw their ultimate intimidator. They had it all planned out. Zar'thok would land somewhere populated, preferably during peak hours when lots of humans could witness his terrifying presence. He'd make his speech about galactic domination, maybe crush a few cars for dramatic effect, and Earth would surrender before dinner time. There was just one tiny problem with this plan. Zar'thok's navigation system had what you might call a minor malfunction. Instead of landing in Times Square or the White House lawn, his ship's computer decided that the most strategic location on Earth was a truck stop diner in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska. At 3 in the morning. The diner was called Betty's All Night Eats, and it was exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find at a truck stop in Nebraska. Fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly dead, coffee that could strip paint, and pie that was either 3 days old or 3 weeks old, depending on how brave you were feeling. Zar'thok materialized outside the diner in a flash of purple light, his ship's teleporter depositing him directly in the gravel parking lot. He stood there for a moment, taking in his surroundings. This wasn't exactly the dramatic entrance he'd planned. No crowds of terrified humans. No cameras broadcasting his arrival to the world. Just a few semi-trucks, a beat-up Honda Civic, and the gentle hum of a neon sign that kept flickering between open and opie. But Zar'thok was a professional. He'd adapt. He'd make this work. After all, how hard could it be to terrify a handful of humans in a roadside diner? Meet Dolores Martinez, 67 years old, grandmother of 12, survivor of 3 divorces, 2 economic recessions, and 40 years in the customer service industry. She'd been working the night shift at Betty's for the past 15 years, ever since her last husband ran off with a woman half his age and twice his IQ. Dolores had seen it all. Drunk truckers, meth heads, traveling salesmen who thought they were God's gift to womankind, politicians during election season. She'd dealt with every variety of human nonsense imaginable, and she'd done it all with a smile, a pot of coffee, and the kind of patience that comes from raising 6 children and burying 2 husbands. She was wiping down the counter when the diner door swung open with a bang. In walked Zar'thok the Destroyer, ducking his massive frame through the doorway. His 4 arms spread wide in what was clearly meant to be an intimidating gesture. His red eyes blazed in the fluorescent light. His voice boomed across the empty diner like thunder. "Tremble, insignificant humans, for I am Zar'thok the Destroyer, herald of the Galactic Council, and bringer of your doom." Dolores looked up from her cleaning, gave him a once-over, and went back to wiping the counter. "Honey, you need to keep it down. We've got other customers trying to eat." She gestured toward the corner booth where an elderly trucker named Pete was working his way through a plate of eggs and toast, seemingly unbothered by the 9-foot alien warrior who'd just announced the end of the world. Zar'thok blinked his glowing red eyes. This wasn't going according to plan. In his experience, humans were supposed to scream, faint, or at least show some basic recognition that their lives were in immediate danger. He tried again, projecting his voice even louder. I have come to demand your species' immediate and unconditional surrender to the Galactic Council. Your pathetic world will bow before the might of the Eternal Empire. Dolores sighed and put down her cleaning rag. She'd dealt with this type before. Dramatic entrances, grand proclamations, way too much yelling. Usually it was divorced dads going through midlife crises, but the principle was the same. Look, sweetie, I don't know what kind of community theater group you're with, but the costume's real nice. Very authentic. Now, you want some coffee? Or are you just here to practice your lines? Community theater? Zar'thok's voice cracked slightly. I am the most feared warrior in 17 galaxies. I have conquered worlds. I have made entire civilizations weep at the mention of my name. That's nice, dear. Dolores was already pouring coffee into a mug. You want cream with that? And before you ask, no, we don't have any of that fancy oat milk nonsense. This is Nebraska. She slid the mug across the counter toward him. Zar'thok stared at it like it might explode. In all his years of conquest, no one had ever offered him coffee during a surrender demand. It was so unexpected that he actually found himself reaching for it with one of his 4 hands. I don't understand, he said, his voice dropping to a more normal volume. Are you not terrified? Do you not comprehend the magnitude of the threat I represent? Dolores leaned against the counter, studying him with the kind of professional assessment that comes from decades of dealing with difficult customers. Honey, you're big. I'll give you that. And the glowing eyes are a nice touch. But if you think you're the scariest thing I've dealt with on the night shift, you've got another think coming. Just last week, I had a guy in here high on bath salts trying to convince me he was the reincarnation of Elvis. At least he tipped. Zar'thok was beginning to panic. This was not how conquests were supposed to go. He'd studied human psychology extensively. He knew all about their fight or flight responses, their pack mentalities, their tendency to crumble under pressure. What he hadn't counted on was encountering a human who seemed completely immune to pressure. He decided to escalate. Surely a demonstration of his power would get through to this strange female. Behold, he raised all 4 arms dramatically. Witness the fate of those who defy the Galactic Council. A holographic display materialized above his head, showing the smoking ruins of the crystalline cities of Vega. Entire populations fleeing in terror. Massive warships blotting out the sun. These worlds thought they could resist. They were wrong. Your Earth will share their fate unless you surrender immediately. Dolores glanced up at the hologram, then back at Zar'thok. That's real nice, honey, but you're dripping space goo on my clean floor. She was right. The holographic projector was malfunctioning, leaving small puddles of luminescent fluid on the linoleum. I'll need you to clean that up before you leave. And speaking of leaving, you've been here for 10 minutes without ordering anything. This is a restaurant, not a bus station. You need to order something or move along. Zar'thok felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: confusion. Complete, utter confusion. He tried a different approach, flexing his massive muscles and allowing his natural bioluminescent war markings to flare to life. The effect was genuinely terrifying. His already imposing frame seemed to grow even larger. Patterns of light danced across his skin like living tattoos. His red eyes blazed brighter. This display had once caused an entire army to lay down their weapons and beg for mercy. Dolores reached under the counter and pulled out a spray bottle. Okay, now you're just showing off. And I don't know what kind of chemicals you're using to make those lights, but I can't have you contaminating the food preparation area. I could lose my health department rating. She started spraying disinfectant in his general direction. You know what? I think you're having some kind of episode. Let me get you a glass of water and maybe a piece of pie. Low blood sugar can make people act all sorts of crazy. I don't want pie, Zar'thok roared. I want your unconditional surrender. Well, you can't have it. I'm not authorized to surrender anything except maybe the last piece of apple pie, and frankly, you haven't been nearly polite enough to earn it. She turned to Pete, who was still methodically working his way through his eggs. Pete, you ever deal with someone having a breakdown like this? Pete looked up, chewed thoughtfully, and shrugged. Had a dispatcher once who thought he was Napoleon. We just let him wear the hat until he got it out of his system. See? Dolores turned back to Zar'thok. Pete here's got the right idea. You want to play alien conqueror, that's fine. But you're going to do it quietly, and you're going to order something, and you're going to clean up your mess. Those are the rules. Zar'thok stared at her, then at Pete, then back at her. For the first time in his career as the galaxy's most feared warrior, he was completely out of his depth. Zar'thok slumped onto one of the diner stools, his massive frame making the furniture creak ominously. This was not going well. Actually, this was going so badly that he was starting to question everything he thought he knew about psychological warfare. I don't understand, he said. And for the first time since entering the diner, his voice was almost normal, almost human. I am Zar'thok the Destroyer. I have ended civilizations. Entire species speak my name in whispers. Dolores poured herself a cup of coffee and settled in across from him. She'd seen that look before. It was the same expression her ex-husband had when he realized his midlife crisis motorcycle couldn't actually make him 20 years younger. Sounds like you've got some anger issues, sweetie. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, all that destroying and conquering. When's the last time you took a vacation? Vacation? Zar'thok blinked. I don't take vacations. I am a weapon of the Galactic Council. Weapons don't take vacations. Well, there's your problem right there. Dolores leaned forward, slipping into the same tone she used when her grandchildren were having emotional breakdowns. You can't spend your whole life being angry and scary. That's no way to live. What do you do for fun? Fun? The concept seemed to genuinely confuse him. I conquer things. That's what I do. But what do you like to do? Hobbies? Interests? You got any friends? Zar'thok was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller than it had been all night. The other warriors fear me. The council uses me. I don't think I have friends. Oh, honey. Dolores reached across and patted one of his massive hands. That's just sad. No wonder you're going around yelling at people in diners. You're lonely. The door chimed again, and two more customers wandered in, a long-haul trucker named Maria and an insomniac named Bob who worked at the grain elevator. They took one look at Zar'thok and settled into a booth, clearly treating the 9-foot alien warrior like he was just another piece of late-night diner entertainment. Hey Dolores, Maria called out. Your friend here part of that science fiction convention in Omaha? Something like that, Dolores replied. Bob, you want your usual? Yeah, thanks. And tell your friend the costume's pretty impressive, very realistic. Zar'thok looked around at the small group of humans, all of whom were treating his presence like it was perfectly normal. Back on the war moon of Krexneth, his mere appearance would have sent warriors fleeing. Here people were ordering pie and making small talk. I don't understand you humans, he said, mostly to himself. What's to understand? Pete had finished his eggs and was working on his third cup of coffee. You seem like a decent enough fellow, if a little dramatic. You remind me of my nephew. Always going on about his video games and his comic books. Lots of yelling about conquering this and destroying that. But I am genuinely dangerous, Zar'thok protested weakly. I have killed thousands. I have destroyed entire armies. Maria shrugged. So has my ex-husband if you count his credit rating and my faith in marriage. Doesn't mean he wasn't just a scared little boy inside. For the first time in his life, Zar'thok felt something crumble inside him. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was something worse. It was the realization that maybe, just maybe, He wasn't as terrifying as he thought he was. Dolores refilled Zar'thok's coffee cup and settled back onto her stool. She'd been watching the big alien's emotional breakdown with the kind of professional interest that comes from years of dealing with customers having existential crises at 3 in the morning. "You know what your problem is, sweetie?" she said, stirring sugar into her own coffee. "You think scary is about being big and loud and threatening. That's amateur hour." Zar'thok looked up at her with something approaching hope. "Then what is scary?" "Real scary is dealing with unreasonable people for minimum wage and still managing to smile about it. Real scary is Black Friday at the mall. You think you're intimidating? Honey, I've handled soccer moms fighting over the last discounted television. I've dealt with customers who want to return items they bought 3 years ago without a receipt. You want to see psychological warfare? Try explaining to a Karen why her expired coupon isn't valid." She gestured around the diner with her coffee cup. "You see this place? This is humanity's real training ground. Every night I deal with drunk truckers, meth heads, travelers having breakdowns, and people who think the customer is always right even when they're clearly insane. And I do it all with a smile and a pot of coffee that could strip rust off a bumper." Zar'thok was listening intently now, like a student trying to understand a particularly difficult concept. "But how do you do it?" he asked. "How do you maintain your sanity?" "Practice," Bob chimed in from his booth. "Lots and lots of practice. You know what I did yesterday? Spent 4 hours on hold with customer service trying to get my internet fixed. 4 hours. And when I finally got through, they told me I'd called the wrong department." "That's nothing," Maria added. "Last month I had to go to the DMV to renew my commercial license. Took 6 hours, 3 different forms, and they still got my address wrong. But did I scream and threaten to destroy anyone? No, I just smiled and said thank you." "You humans are masochists," Zar'thok said, but there was admiration in his voice now. "We're survivors," Dolores corrected. "You know what happened the last time someone tried to conquer Earth? We made them fill out paperwork. Lots and lots of paperwork. In triplicate. With forms that had to be notarized." Pete nodded sagely. "I heard about that. Those Zephyrian invaders? They gave up after trying to register their war machines with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Apparently, the bureaucracy broke their will to live." "That's impossible," Zar'thok protested. "The Zephyrians conquered half the Andromeda Galaxy." "Maybe. Mine," Dolores said with a shrug. "But they never had to deal with human bureaucracy, or human customer service, or humans who've been working retail during the holiday season. You want to know why no one successfully conquered Earth? It's not because we're physically strong or technologically advanced. It's because we're professionally dead inside, and that makes us virtually indestructible." She leaned forward, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "You know what the real human superpower is? We can stand in line for hours without complaining. We can smile at people who are screaming at us for things that aren't our fault. We can assemble furniture with instructions that were clearly written by someone who's never seen furniture before. We've monorolst in the end, and trained by decades of mundane suffering to handle absolutely anything life throws at us." Zar'thok sat back, processing this information. It was starting to make a terrible kind of sense. "So when I come in here making threats about galactic domination..." "It's just another Tuesday," Dolores finished. "Honestly, you're not even in the top 10 weirdest customers I've had this month. There was a guy last week who insisted on paying for his coffee with Monopoly money and got genuinely upset when I wouldn't accept it." 3 hours later, Zar'thok was on his ship, staring at the communication device that would connect him to the Galactic Council. He'd spent the remaining time at the diner listening to stories of human endurance, retail workers surviving Black Friday, the customer service representatives dealing with people who called tech support because they couldn't figure out how to turn on their computers, parents navigating school pickup lines during flu season. It had been educational, and more than a little terrifying. The holographic forms of the 12 council members materialized before him. their various alien faces displaying the same expression of smug anticipation they always wore when expecting good news about a conquest. Report. Zar'thok, commanded High Counselor Vexnera, a crystalline being whose voice sounded like breaking glass. Have the humans surrendered? Zar'thok took a deep breath. I have completed my assessment of the human species. Excellent. And? I recommend we leave them alone. Permanently. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Counselor Bryntalk, whose species resembled a cross between a squid and a filing cabinet, spoke up. I beg your pardon? The humans are too dangerous to conquer, Zar'thok said firmly. They have a psychological resilience that borders on supernatural. They've been conditioned by their own society to endure any level of bureaucratic torture, customer service abuse, and general life frustration without breaking. They're essentially immune to intimidation. That's impossible, High Counselor Vexnera snapped. You're Zar'thok the Destroyer. You've never failed to break a species' will. I spent 3 hours with a single human female, Zar'thok replied. She treated me like a disruptive customer and made me question my entire existence. Then she gave me life advice and a piece of apple pie. The pie was excellent, by the way. The council erupted in outraged chatter. Zar'thok waited for them to quiet down before continuing. There's something else. The human I encountered, Dolores Martinez, has expressed interest in galactic diplomacy. She believes that most interspecies conflicts could be resolved through what she calls proper customer service techniques. You want us to negotiate with a primitive human? Counselor Bryntalk's tentacles quivered with indignation. I want you to meet her. She's agreed to a holographic conference. Before the council could object, Zar'thok activated the communication link to Betty's all-night eats. Dolores appeared in the middle of the council chamber, still wearing her diner uniform and holding a pot of coffee. Well, hello there, she said, looking around at the assembled alien dignitaries with the same unflappable calm she'd shown Zar'thok. You must be the folks causing all this trouble. I'm Dolores Martinez, pleased to meet you. High Counselor Vexnera drew herself up to her full, imposing height. Human, you will address the Galactic Council with proper respect. We are the supreme authority in this galaxy. Well, that's nice, dear, Dolores replied, completely unfazed. Now, your friend here tells me you're having some problems with your conquest policies. Sounds like a customer satisfaction issue to me. When's the last time you actually asked the people you're conquering what they want? We don't ask, Counselor Bryntalk sputtered. We demand compliance. Well, there's your problem right there. That's not how you build lasting relationships. In the service industry, we call that alienating your customer base. No pun intended. What followed was the most surreal diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. Dolores, armed with nothing but 40 years of customer service experience and an endless supply of coffee, but systematically dismantled the Galactic Council's entire approach to interspecies relations. She explained the concept of customer satisfaction surveys. She introduced them to the idea of complaint resolution. She taught them about the importance of saying please and thank you. By the end of the session, she had somehow convinced the most powerful beings in the galaxy to consider a complete overhaul of their conquest policies. So let me get this straight, High Counselor Vexnera said, her crystalline form somehow managing to look confused. Instead of demanding immediate surrender, we should ask nicely? It's a start, Dolores replied. And if that doesn't work, we can discuss other options. But I've found that most problems can be solved with a little patience, a lot of politeness, and really good coffee. 6 months later, Earth had become the unofficial customer service training center of the galaxy. Alien diplomats from across the known universe came to learn the ancient human arts of patience, politeness, and dealing with difficult customers. The Galactic Council, now operating under Dolores' guidance, had achieved more peaceful resolutions in 6 months than they had in the previous 6 centuries. And Zar'thok? He'd taken Dolores' advice about finding hobbies. He'd discovered he had a talent for pottery. Who knew that hands designed for crushing could also create beautiful ceramic bowls? As for Dolores, she was still working the night shift at Betty's all-night eats. But now she also held the title of Earth's first galactic customer service consultant. The pay was better, but the coffee was still terrible. Some things even galactic diplomacy couldn't fix.